Please welcome to Iowa and to the 2015 Family Leadership Summit, Florida's U.S. Senator Marco Rubio.
Standing ovation.
That's good. Do I sit over here? All right.
You get the better seat. So not only am I ill, but the senator from Florida has been ill as well, and you will hear it in his voice. So the question you should do is count the number of times he coughs and I cough. I promise, and if you... Okay, I'm supposed to do the jokes here.
No, I know.
If we can turn the house lights up, and part of what's going to make this special is that every speaker will begin with a question from the audience. And so I want the cameras to turn on you all who are here, and I'm going to ask you two very simple questions. How many of you, by show of hands, are better off today than your parents were when they were your age? Who believes you're better off than your parents? Raise your hands. It's almost everybody. Now be honest with me. How many of you truly believe, not that you want, but you believe that your children will be better off than you when they get to be your age? Raise your hands. If the reporters here can look around you, almost no hands are up. We have lost faith in the future.
Yeah.
The polling that we've seen, it's all very pessimistic. The most optimistic people on the face of the earth are first-generation immigrants. Now, you know something about immigration policy. You were put through the ringer for over a year. What did you learn from that experience, and what advice would you give them now?
Well, a couple points. I think the American people believe in immigration and want it to work for America. I don't think we can make any progress on it until we bring illegal immigration under control. That's the biggest lesson of the last 3 years. I believe people are ready to be very reasonable about it, modernize our system, but before they do anything, they want to make sure that the problem we have now of a rampant, out-of-control illegal immigration is brought under control and never happens again. So then and they don't believe that it is, and they don't trust this president to do it.
Then what's the first step?
I think there's two steps. The first is we have to secure our borders, and our border isn't just the border with Mexico. We also have to secure our airports and seaports. 40% of people in this country illegally come legally. They overstay a visa. We have no idea who they are because we only log you in, we don't log you out. Imagine having a hotel that you only check in but never check out. You wouldn't know who's there. And the other thing we need is an electronic verification system, E-Verify, for employers. The magnet that draws many people here is jobs, and we have to create a system where employers can reliably be expected and demanded to check and ensure the people they're hiring are not legally here. If you do those two things, you will bring illegal immigration under control.
Do you guys agree with him? I don't want to.
They can't hear.
Okay, we heard you the first time. By the way, that gentleman who's screaming, I would do anything for your voice right now.
I'll just move my mic closer to my mouth. Yeah.
I want to invite you, if there's something that you strongly agree with, it's okay to applaud. I don't want to silence that. I just want to make sure that we're respectful of people as they're up here. So my follow-up question for that is Washington capable of solving it, or is Washington so broken that we're going to talk about immigration year after year?
I think that's up to whoever our leaders we elect are. I mean, people have to be committed to the idea that our job is to solve problems, not to just give speeches about them. These are solvable problems, not just on immigration, on our economy, on energy, on national security. The bad news is America's not fulfilling its potential as a country. We are a great country. We can be even greater than we are today, especially in this new century. That's the good news. The bad news is we're not doing it. And these are self-inflicted wounds. We are a nation with a government that refuses to solve its problems or has been unable to solve its problems for longer than a decade. And eventually that question you just asked the audience, if our children are not better off, it's because we didn't do what it took to ensure that they were better off.
But you're part of that government.
I agree, and it's frustrating. It was frustrating for 4 years in the Senate as Harry Reid chose to do nothing. He chose to literally do nothing. I mean, the Senate basically didn't do a thing. And even now, we face this situation where even if we make progress, you have a president that will veto things. So there are consequences to electing someone to the highest office in the land that is more committed to doing things by executive order than through the proper channel of the division of powers that our Constitution gives us. And that's why this election is so important.
One more on this. So I would be remiss if I don't ask you, what do you do with the 11 million who are here now?
That's a very difficult situation. First of all, I don't even think we can begin to have the debate about it until you do two things. One is secure the border, and the way I described the E-Verify as well. And then you have to modernize legal immigration. I don't know if people realize every year the United States admits permanently 1 million human beings to the United States, permanently. And you know how they come here? Primarily on the basis of whether or not they have a relative living here. In the 21st century, it cannot be on the basis of whether you have a relative. It has to be on what you can contribute to the country. Are you coming to be an American, or are you coming to live in America? And I think that if we do those two things, I think the vast majority of Americans are going to be very reasonable with someone who's been here for 15 years, hasn't otherwise violated the law, is going to start paying taxes, pay a fine, and all they do is want a work permit or something like that. I just don't think we can get to that point until we've done the other two things. In fact, I don't think we can get to that point. I know we can't get to that point, having gone through this the last couple years.
Well, there's something you're going to have to get to. And if people have a question for Marco Rubio, there is a microphone down here, there's a microphone up there, there's a microphone over there, and a microphone here. Now is your chance to go to the microphones if you want to ask a question of Senator Rubio. Something that is going to happen in the next 60 days, and that is the Iranian treaty. Obviously, you're against it. What likelihood do you have of being able to prevent it?
I think it all depends on whether we are able to convince at least 13 or 14 Democrats to vote against it. And there's plenty of reasons, and you're going to learn about them over the next few days. I'm going to give you three. The first is the inspection requirements in the deal are a complete sham. It sounds almost like an arbitration panel for a contract between two people or two companies. Basically, we have to ask for it. Actually, it specifically says no American inspectors are allowed into Iran. Second, it says that if we want to inspect a facility in Iran, you have to ask for permission from Iran. If Iran says no, then they go through this complicated 24-day appeal process before this group of people and this council. If that doesn't work, it has to be moved up to the foreign ministers. If that doesn't work, it winds up at the UN Security Council. When you add up all the days, it can be well over 50 days. Guess what happens after those 50 days? They probably cleaned up the site you wanted to go see in the first place. And here's the worst part of it. If in fact they refuse to allow you to inspect, the consequences are Iran just basically walks away from the deal. So it better be a really big violation for these countries in Europe, for example, to go along with demanding that they allow us to inspect. But here's one of the things that's really outrageous in this deal. It says that we have to help Iran develop technical abilities, economic, trade, manufacturing. We basically have to help Iran, in the deal signed, we have to help Iran become more powerful. No, it requires us to do that. It requires us to help Iran fight against sabotage that might exist against their nuclear program. Well, the only people that are trying to sabotage it are our allies. So for the first time in a long time, or in American history, we are now required to work against countries like Israel on behalf of Iran. And by the way, we now have multiple American hostages. They're completely untouched in this whole deal. And I could go on and on. They get to build long-range rockets. All kinds of human rights violators are going to be taken off the sanctions list. All these requirements go away in 8 to 15 years.
Then why is this
Other than that, I guess it's good.
Then why? Then why is this president support? If it's that bad, then why would this president do this?
Because he wants a legacy. He is dying to build out exhibits for his presidential library. And this is going to be the Barack Obama opened up America to Iran, and the next president blew it. But Barack Obama is the one that created peace in our time. And it's absurd, and our allies in the region know it's absurd. And so what they're now realizing, and so we now live in a world where we treat the Ayatollah in Tehran with more respect than the prime minister of the only pro-American, free enterprise democracy in the Middle East, the state of Israel.
We're going to go to microphone 1 over there.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you're willing to call the terrorism we've been facing in our country and other countries as Islamic terrorism, and if it is, how will you keep it from sucking our youth and Islamic youth into that?
Yeah, I mean, that is what it is. It's not radical Presbyterian terrorism. It's radical Islamic terrorism. And And I want you to know why it's fair for us to call it that. It isn't fair to the non-radical Muslims not to call it radical Islam. The second point is it has to be defeated both at home and abroad. The first thing, we have to defeat that ideology. We have to defeat it, for example, online. We have the capability in this country to go after them. Why do they have a Twitter account up? Why do we allow ISIS to have these online social media networks? We have the ability to take them down. Let's do it. Second, we have to target them militarily in their safe havens. That ISIS doesn't exist unless they have a place to operate from. And that's why we need to increase airstrikes. That's why we need to increase working with our allies in the region with more logistical support, more special operations forces to eliminate and take away from radical jihadists the safe havens and the operating space they need to exist and prosper. We have to show the world, and especially these youngsters that are being radicalized, that ISIS is not some unbeatable, inevitable power. ISIS is someone that we can humiliate, and we need to. We need to subject them to high-profile, humiliating defeats that we broadcast and advertise to the world. We have won propaganda wars before. We won them during the Cold War, we won them during the Second World War, and we can win it against radical jihadists, but we're not doing that now.
Microphone 2.
Thank you for coming today, Senator Rubio.
Good morning.
Regarding global warming, climate change, and the EPA, how do you feel the Obama administration has handled this? Is this hurting our manufacturing competitiveness, hurting jobs, et cetera? How would a Rubio administration handle the balance between...
They absolutely are hurting us. First of all, the EPA now wants to regulate everything. Basically, every waterway in the country, they now want to get their claws on. That's number one. Number two is, I think it's important for us to protect our natural environment. I know of no one who wants water to be poisoned. I know of no one that wants air to be unbreathable. But I also know of no one that wants to go back to a third world economy. I also know of no one who wants to see single mothers have to pay $100 a month more in their utility bill. I know of no one that wants to make the price of food more expensive because it now costs more money to haul eggs from Iowa to some other part of the country. And that's what we're going to get if we go forward on this radical environmental agenda. I believe it is possible to fully utilize our energy resources in this country and protect our natural environment. And the job of policymakers is to do that. That's what our EPA will do. That's what my administration will be about.
Let's go to microphone number 4, back there.
Well, that is far.
Marco, Senator Rubio.
Yes, sir.
My question to you is, our national debt is over $18 trillion and will be higher by the election of next year. What steps would you take to reduce it?
Well, the first step is we have to explain to people why we have a national debt. Let me tell you why we don't have a national debt. It isn't foreign aid. It's less than 1% of our budget. It isn't food stamps and welfare. There is abuse and fraud in these programs, and that needs to be brought under control. But the driver of our debt is, and it isn't military spending, which we are eviscerating and leaving our children and our nation vulnerable to attack. The driver of our debt, what drives our long-term national debt is the way Social Security and Medicare are currently structured for future generations. Now, let me start out by telling you, I'm from Florida. You may not know this, but there are millions of people in Florida on Medicare and Social Security. One of them is my mother. I would never be for anything that is bad for my mother. I can't tell you how old she is because she gets mad, but let me just say she's been alive for eight decades plus 4 years. But I recognize that in order for us to save Medicare and Social Security, it will not be able to work the same way for me as it did for her. My generation and people that are younger than me need to accept that if we want to balance our budget, leave Medicare and Social Security exactly the way it is for people on it now, and save those programs for the future, we're going to have to retire a little later than our parents. Our benefits won't grow as fast as our parents' Social Security grew. And our Medicare may not be a plan from the government. It might be money we get every month that we can use to buy a plan for ourselves on the private market, somewhat the way Medicare Advantage works now, which my mother has. That is not too much to ask of Americans my age in order to save Medicare and Social Security the way it is for our parents, balance our budget, and prevent a debt crisis for our nation.
So One second, hold on. You said someone of your age. How old are you?
I'm 44, but I feel 45 today.
You've been in the Senate for 1 term. You're very articulate. You know the issues pretty well. People have compared you to other individuals. This is the single biggest knock on you, is that those who have talked about you have compared you to other conservative leaders and have suggested that you haven't been around long enough?
Well, here's the truth. I haven't lived as long as some of the other people running, but I don't think anyone running for president understands what life is like for people today more than I do. You want to talk about people that live paycheck to paycheck? I'm glad that candidates like Hillary Clinton talk about people that live paycheck to paycheck. I know people that live paycheck to paycheck. My parents lived paycheck to paycheck. I love listening to the Democrats last night in their thing. What did they do?
Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, Cedar Rapids. It wasn't here. And I'm sure none of you went, but I watched a little bit of it last night. Oh, you were there?
I was there.
Okay, good. I never trusted him anyway. I'm a joke. It's joking.
I learned a new word, comrade.
I love listening to them talk about people with student loan debt. I'm glad they're focusing on that issue. I had student loan debt. Up until 4 years ago, I had student loan debt. And the other point that I would make is, it is true, there are people running that have a lot more experience than I do on the issues we faced 18 years ago. But no one running has more experience on the issues that we face right now, today, in the 21st century, with a world that's more dangerous than ever and an economy that's changing faster than we've ever seen since the Industrial Revolution.
Microphone 1.
Hi, Senator. If you were elected president today, what specifically would you do to move our country forward?
Well, there's a number of things that we need to do, but I want to focus on 3. Number 1,
Actually, I need to hold you just so you understand. This is a summit rather than a traditional political partisan event. So I just want to, the next president should do is probably a better approach.
Is that for the lawyers that you're saying?
Yes. Who's
okay.
a lawyer in here? Raise your hand if you're a lawyer. Get out.
But I'm recovering. So the next president needs to do 3 things. I hope the media got. The next president needs to do 3 things. The first thing, we have to become the best place in the world to create the best paying jobs of the 21st century. We have to compete with dozens of other countries. We need a tax code, limited regulations, and a balanced budget that will allow us to be the best place in the world to create the best paying jobs this century provides. Number 2, we have to revolutionize what higher education means. It'll still mean 4-year degrees for a lot of people, but we can't afford to graduate people with a mountain of loans for a degree that doesn't lead to jobs. How many Greek philosophers do we really still need in America? Or anywhere for that matter. And so we shouldn't be requiring people to borrow money to pay for that. We have to have more vocational education, and we have to create flexible higher education programs that are available to people that are stuck in low-wage jobs but have to work full-time and raise a family. And the third thing is, we have to remain the most powerful nation on earth. That means militarily, morally, and politically. And that's why we have to rebuild our defenses, rebuild our foreign policy and the trust our allies have in us, and strengthen family life in America. You cannot have a strong country without strong families, and you can't have strong families without empowered marriages and empowered parents. And I hope our president will lead us in that endeavor as well.
This program, the chief sponsor is the family leader, and you said strengthen families. Do you really think that there's a role from Washington, D.C. in strengthening families?
Not the primary role. The primary role of strengthening families is on each of us individually, as a mother and father, a husband, a wife, a member of a community, of a church. But we shouldn't have a government that discourages family formation.
Do we now?
We do. We have a tax code that punishes marriage. We have safety net programs that discourage people from getting married. We deny parents in America the right to put their children in the school of their choice. And we have an attorney general and a Supreme Court that will not stand up for the rights of every American family to instill in their children traditional values without being persecuted or discriminated against by government or by society.
Microphone 2.
Hi. I have a question on, recently there's been controversy in the news about methods we've used in CIA interrogation sites regarding to Al-Qaeda and whatnot. How do you feel about that in regards to Obama terminating that within 48 hours of presidency? Do you support bringing it back?
Well, enhanced interrogations have not been used in that method for a long time, and we're not going to go back to those methods to begin with. But let me say this, and I think people need to understand that. There are dangerous people on this planet that every single day plot to kill as many Americans as possible. They work actively to do it. If we ever get our hands on people like that and are able to take them off the battlefield, and we are able to gather intelligence from them that allows us to prevent another attack, we should do everything within our legal power to try to access that information. Not through the American criminal justice system, but treating them as enemy combatants, the way you would as an enemy in the field. And the one thing we should not do is advertise what our interrogation methods are. You know why? Let me just close. Let me explain why. Let me tell you why you don't advertise your interrogation methods. Because then you allow these terrorists to practice. You allow them to prepare on how to resist it. So really right now it's not an issue because this president isn't arresting any terrorists anymore. We're not gathering any intelligence anymore. He wants to close Guantanamo.
That's a pretty strong statement.
Which one?
The president.
He's not. They want to close Guantanamo. There is no place to take them anymore if you capture a terrorist.
Are you saying that this administration has gone soft on terrorism?
No, you know what they do now? This is even more humane, I suppose, in the eyes of the left. They just kill them with a drone. As opposed to trying to capture as many people as you can and gathering intelligence from them. We don't do that nearly as much as we once did, and we have lost intelligence in the process. The truth is there will always be a role to play in the battlefield and confronting the enemy and eliminating them, but we also need to find the ability to remove people from the battlefield and gather intelligence if that's possible. And when you're talking about closing Guantanamo, well then what you're basically saying is we have no intention of ever again removing people from the battlefield and trying to gather actionable intelligence that we can use to prevent future attacks and dismantle terrorist networks.
Is Barack Obama soft on terror?
Well, Barack Obama is confused about global terrorism because he won't call it that, number one. I'm sure he's against it. I know that he is, but he won't call it what it is, and he won't confront it in a meaningful way. And so we're conducting 11 airstrikes a day against ISIS. Well, that's not American power. What is that? It's not an effective way to confront the challenge that we face. In fact, he told us a year and a half ago that ISIS was a JV team. There was nothing to worry about. Today, ISIS is located in Libya, other nations in North Africa. They're now threatening the Sinai. They just blew up an Egyptian ship yesterday. They're in Iraq and Syria. They're increasingly active in Lebanon. They're probably deeply embedded in refugee camps in Syria, and they're starting to pop up in places like Afghanistan and even the tribal areas of Pakistan. They're growing, they are spreading, and somehow our tactics remain the same a year later with no concise plan to confront them and no real strategy moving forward.
Zen, I want to give you one opportunity to close.
Actually, can I rely on this to close with something I think it's important?
If you'll tell them what it is.
It's a Bible. I think they know. Well, chapter 12, verse 48, it talks about our obligations. It says, "For everyone who has been given much, much will be required, and to whom they entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more." I think that speaks to us in our individual lives. I think that speaks to us in our individual lives. It certainly does to me. America doesn't owe me anything. I have a debt to this country I will never repay. It is the nation that literally changed the history of my family. When my father was 9 years old and lost his mother, he had to go work. He had to leave school. He never went back to school, and the mission of his life was to give us the chance to do everything he never could do. And that was only possible because of America. But it also speaks to us as a nation. Much has been given to this country. We have been blessed with this vast, fertile land, with the most creative, hardworking, and innovative people in the history of mankind. And with that, all of these blessings have come a responsibility to lead the world politically, to lead the world economically, to lead the world militarily, and to lead the world morally. There are a lot of people out there that may talk bad about America, but they admire us. They're inspired by us. They believe they can be better because of us. That's the country I want to leave for my children. I know that's the country you want to leave for yours. I hope that's what this election will be about in 2016.
Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good Lord.
Thank you.